Then we've got Sinenhlanhla Mnguni, who's from the Fair Trade Independent Tobacco Association, joining us this morning to talk more about this as well. I mean, what is it that you are expecting to come out of this national budget speech by Enoch Godongwana this afternoon?
Look, we're expecting a similar increase to what we saw last year, which was an 8% increase in excise. Of course, like the alcohol industry, we would like for Treasury not to impose an increase in excise taxes. As we've seen, of course, the industry struggling in as far as coming back from the effects of the 5-month ban on the sale of cigarettes during 2020 when we went into hard lockdown. Of course, that then exacerbated the problem we've had and faced for a number of years in relation to the illicit trade in cigarettes, and which to date we're fighting a hard battle, and we're not succeeding in containing the illicit trade. And of course that is also hit into the revenue of the legitimate industry. So of course we're hoping that common sense prevails and that Treasury doesn't impose an increase in excise taxes in comparison to what we saw last year.
Talk us through the illicit trade. I mean, have you engaged with government departments or related stakeholders about increasing oversight and just ensuring that the legal traders within the industry are able to reap the rewards of what they produce for the industry?
Of course. I mean, this has been a discussion that predates even the COVID-19 pandemic, wherein, of course, we know that the illicit trade in cigarettes was highlighted, for instance, in the Nugent report, which looked into the affairs at the South African Revenue Service. And as an organization, we have been at pains to point out the challenges that legitimate cigarette manufacturers face as a result of the illicit trade in cigarettes. And of course, an increase in sin taxes is one of the issues that exacerbates the challenge we face coming from the illicit trade. As we know, of course, that taxes associated with cigarettes are not at the same level in our neighboring countries as they are in South Africa, which makes South Africa fertile ground for those who ply their trade in the illicit trade to, of course, smuggle cigarettes into the country.
Right. And then just give us a broad sense, because we hear a lot from the alcohol producers in the country, wine producers, spirit producers and the like, and the impact that they've had to face of the pandemic. You've spoken about the illicit trade, but overall, for producers in the industry, how bad has it been?
It's become quite challenging. Of course, we know as FITA, which represents the majority of cigarette manufacturers in South Africa, that our members are struggling at present. And of course, we've seen job cuts, and we've seen some business coming under threat. We've seen even further down in the value chain, a lot of tobacconists closing down as a result of the growing illicit trade. So of course, this is something that we've brought to the attention of government, because the legitimate tobacco industry in South Africa is under threat. We know that the illicit trade is worth billions, and of course those billions are eating into not only what Treasury collects by way of revenue, but also the income which is supposed to be generated by legitimate tax-paying role players in the tobacco industry.
And then just a final thought from you, the outlook for the industry, given the lay of the land that you've just painted out for us. What are producers looking forward to in the medium to the long term?
Look, we're looking for a more engaging sort of relationship with government and role players, which are custodians of the tobacco industry. We're hoping that common sense prevails, as I stated earlier on, and that, you know, industry is not penalized to a point where it is in essence killed by regulatory processes which were implemented with the desire to better regulate industry. And I think for that to manifest, we need to have a more hand-in-hand relationship with government and all stakeholders in the tobacco industry to ensure that whatever policies and regulations are put into place are, of course, cater the concerns of the legitimate tobacco industry.
Right. I mean, I did say it was my final question, but I have to follow up on what you've just said, in that an increased engagement relationship with the government and related stakeholders. What do you think has been the thing to prevent that in the past? One would think that some of the biggest industries in the country are the ones that engage the most with government and related stakeholders.
Of course, I mean, the tobacco industry is well documented as a very controversial industry, and of course we know that government, being a signatory to the World Health Organization's Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, has been reluctant to engage with industry in as far as issues that govern policies relating to the industry. So, of course, that has been the issue. We've had ministers in the past who have stated on record that they are against the industry altogether and that the industry has done nothing to improve the lives of people in the country. So, of course, coming from that past, we understand the difficulties that government may face, but of course, given that the industry is a great generator of revenue in the country, we feel that it is high time that government does start to engage with industry on a more regular basis, particularly when implementing regulations and policies that affect the industry and those who are employed by it along its value chain.
Brilliant. Thank you very much there. Very interesting insights coming out of the tobacco industry there, Dumelo, calling on government to increase engagement with one of the biggest industries in the country. Obviously, he's just mentioned that they're having to deal with a lot of illicit trade that goes on, and it's increasing, impacting on not just industry, but of our revenue stream here in terms of taxes. And then, of course, that excise tax for the minister to just think about the impact that those hard lockdowns and the tobacco restrictions that were put in place had on producers in the industry. So it's going to be interesting to hear from the minister what comes out today in terms of those excise taxes.
Absolutely.